links for all of that in the description box down below. And a quick hello to our moderators, Alexander in the YouTube chat. We've got Inside Russia Business with us. We've got Zariel also moderating, and I think that's it for now. Yeah, okay. So those are our moderators. Thank you so much for helping us out. And Alexander, before we get to the questions, we have Trump talking about an unconditional surrender. That is what we will accept from Iran. And we have the president of Iran, Pezeshkian, saying that there will be no surrender. And he also said that as far as the Gulf states, the attacks, the council, the Iranian council has decided that the attacks on the Gulf states will stop unless they attack Iran. You kind of left it a bit open-ended, I would say. What does that mean? Are the military bases, are they still fair game?
But we will indeed find out.
But this could also be interpreted as an off-ramp, perhaps. Maybe it's an off-ramp to the United States. Maybe it's some sort of overture to the GCC states. Maybe it's a message to get the military bases out of the Middle East. Maybe it could signal Iran is husbanding its missiles. It could mean a lot of different things. But what are your thoughts on Trump's statement and on Pezeshkian's statement?
Right, let's start with Trump's statement. Trump has said that he wants unconditional surrender from Iran. He says that he wants to choose Iran's supreme leader himself. He says all of these extraordinary, very grandiose things. He said very similar things during the June 2025 war. He said during the June 2025 war that he also wanted unconditional surrender. I remember when he published that on his social, I was absolutely horrified. I said, what does unconditional surrender even mean? And that's the same question that I'm asking now. Now, I thought back in June 2025 that the fact that Trump was talking in this way was a sign that he was under enormous stress. It looked as if the Strait of Hormuz were about to be shut. The Iranians were taking the first steps to do that. It looked to me like a sign of panic. And in fact, shortly after, we learned that he and the Israelis were asking the Iranians for a ceasefire. So it is not impossible that we are looking at the same thing, that this is more than anything else an expression of panic and alarm on Trump's part. And I think what is causing that panic and alarm is not just American losses and American damage across the Middle East, and now we're getting sufficient information to be able to say that there has in fact been extensive damage done to American bases, the radar stations, all of these things have indeed been destroyed. But I think what is really frightening him and spooking him out, though he pretends otherwise, is the enormous surge in energy costs. The fact that oil prices are now above $90 a barrel, and if this war continues and the Strait of Hormuz remains shut, we've now had all of these warnings by the Gulf producers that they're going to have to shut down production and declare force majeure next week. He's looking at $150 a barrel, $200 a barrel. All of this heading into the midterm. It's clear that he didn't plan to expect this. He thought that Khamenei's kick dead would lead to a power vacuum in Iran. And I get the sense that he's panicking. So I think that's probably what this unconditional surrender is all about. But the trouble is, Trump is also in a state of extraordinary, I can almost describe it as intoxication at the same time. So is his war secretary, if I can put it like that. Hex's behavior is becoming more and more bizarre and outlandish. For them to seek for an off-ramp now is going to be extremely difficult. So, I think it oscillates. I mean, Trump also said that, he's not looking to make Iran a democracy. He can remain a religious state, a dictatorship even. That's not what he cares about. He wants it to change his policies. He's saying all kinds of different things. And
Do you hear about the new trend called silk nails? All the beauty media are talking about it. Ultra shiny, natural and healthy looking nails, the clean girl manicure is trending. I wanted to try it, but my nails were in bad shape. So I looked for a polish that would give me that silk nails look.
All right, a moment of truth.
One small bite for man,
That's a big bite for a big arch.
one giant controversy for the internet. In the past few weeks, social media has been having a whole big bag's worth of fun with this video of McDonald's CEO Chris Kempczinski as he tries to demonstrate his love of the fast food chain's new Big Arch Burger. As you can see, he does not exactly take the biggest bite. One commenter even shared a screen grab from this SpongeBob scene where Squidward cautiously tries a Krabby Patty for the first time. Meanwhile, another commenter wrote, somebody said he was eating that burger like he was a contestant on Fear Factor.
I love this product. It is so good.
Kempczinski also refers to the burger as a quote-unquote product multiple times, which commenters also poke fun at for sounding so businesslike. In fact, McDonald's is now...
I think what we should see it as is a sign of the enormous stress he's under. Now, let's turn to Pezeshkian. Now, I've been trying to find in the Iranian media the actual text of this statement that Pezeshkian has made. And I can't find it unless it's a report in the Iranian media, a very lengthy report, this is going all over the Iranian media, of certain comments that Pezeshkian made to none other than Vladimir Putin of Russia. Now, this is a mention that Pezeshkian and Putin had a very long telephone conversation yesterday. And it seems to me that we're getting all sorts of reports that some of the Gulf states, including Saudi Arabia, are now making outreaches to try to see if this thing could stop. They don't want production of oil to stop. They want the Straits of Hormuz to be opened up again to trade. They did not expect to find themselves in this situation. So the report that the Iranian media is carrying of Pezeshkian's words, and these are words that he said to Putin. Yes, Iran is very sorry for these attacks on the American bases because they have taken place in the territory of the Arab states. Iran has no unfriendly intentions towards the Arab states, and Putin, by the way, said that when he was talking, he said to Pezeshkian that he's partly talking to him on behalf of the Arab states. Pezeshkian went on to say that Iran has to defend itself, and that does involve inevitably attacks on bases from which American attacks on Iran are carried out. So you see a certain shift in language. Okay, it's a certain, the nuance is somewhat different. But what Iran wants is certainly a cessation of hostilities, but also a situation, an agreement with the Arab states, that regional security will be decided by the states of the region itself, not by outsiders, which of course means the United States. So, look, putting all that together, one can see what the Iranians might be trying to achieve, and one can see also what the Russians are trying to achieve. In other words, a direct negotiation between Iran and the Gulf states, brokered by the Russians, cutting out the United States completely, agreeing that the American bases in the Middle East should be removed, and some kind of security architecture created between Iran and the Gulf states without the United States involved. Now, I have to say that is incredibly ambitious. Whether the Gulf states would be prepared to go that far is a massive question. I would have guessed no, actually, but who knows? But that seems to me to be what the Iranians are holding out for. So they're basically telling the Gulf states, look, we have no unfriendly intentions or purposes towards you. We have no unfriendly intentions or purposes towards Azerbaijan, which was also discussed, by the way, over the course of this call. But we cannot have a situation where all of these countries host bases, which are then used to attack us.
Well, I would say that the Gulf states cannot go that far. I mean, it's going to be impossible for the current leadership
Yeah.
to kick out the United States, to make a deal without the United States. But they have realized that the United States cannot protect them, and then that was the deal.
Correct.
That was the deal. You provide your military bases, you provide the protection, and then we sell an image of peace, stability, business investment, real estate, expats coming to live here, and all of these things, tourism.
Yes.
That's gone. That's shattered.
Exactly. And in order to get it restored, you need to have some kind of security agreement with Iran. And the Russians are there too. This is the try to break through. That is the negotiation that's taking place. So it is a negotiation, some kind of negotiation between the Gulf states, the Arab states, and the Iranians with the Russians involved. That looks to me what is happening. And I find it very interesting, by the way, that the media here in London is not reporting the fact that Pezeshkian had this very extensive conversation with Putin yesterday. Of course, what we have had in the US are the first admissions that Russia is indeed providing satellite intelligence and targeting assistance to Iran. So the Russians are involved, probably not on an enormous scale, but they are involved in some way, and they do have leverage.
I completely expected Russia and China providing this intel. If they are indeed providing this intel, but let's assume that they are. I don't think this is any surprise to anyone. Actually, they're getting off kind of easy. The United States, when you think about it, given everything that the United States has provided to Ukraine, going all the way back to 2014 with the overthrow of the democratically elected, internationally recognized government in Ukraine. You go from 2014 all the way up to present day. What the U.S. has given to Ukraine it doesn't even compare to providing intel to Iran.
Grainger knows that if you're a maintenance supervisor at a manufacturing facility and your machinery isn't working right, you need to understand what's wrong as soon as possible. So when a conveyor motor falters, Grainger offers diagnostic tools like calibration kits and multimeters to help you identify and fix the problem. With Grainger, you can be confident you have everything you need to keep your facility running smoothly. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Well, absolutely. I mean, it doesn't. In no conceivable way. I mean, I read an article in, I think it's again, Daily Telegraph. Daily Telegraph is the place to look for the supermarket. If this is Russia's revenge in Ukraine, I mean, that's ridiculous. If the Russians really were out for revenge, we would be looking at a completely different situation. I mean, the help that they would be providing to Iran would be on a completely different scale. But I mean, this
There will be no aircraft carriers in the region.
There will be no aircraft carriers. Exactly. Exactly. That is exactly correct. But the Russians have their own interests. They want to have good relations with the Gulf producers, the Arab states. This is a long-standing priority for the Russians. The Russians also are mindful of the interests of other great states, China, India, and all of those. They need to appear a responsible player. And besides, we come up against that long-standing, perennial Russian objective, which is to seek a stability, however and wherever it can be found, in the states around their periphery, around their own country. So this is why they're pursuing that kind of objective.
So the Gulf states, they can't break free from the United States. It's going to be impossible for them to remove the U.S. military bases if they even want to do that. I'm not saying they even want to do that, but okay. The U.S., the Gulf states, now understand that the U.S. cannot provide protection to them if Iran in its current form exists. The U.S. is going to be very alarmed at these developments, understanding that they cannot provide protection to the Gulf states.
Their gross margins are insane.
Speaking to Russia, maybe speaking to China, maybe even thinking about disengaging with the U.S. and then perhaps scaling down the U.S. military presence. So for the neocons in the Trump administration, of which there are a lot of now, not only neocons in the administration, but also neocons advising the Trump administration. There are rumors of Condoleezza Rice
75%.
in and out of the White House. What they're going to tell Trump is, you've got to remove Iran now. Because if Iran exists, if Iran is left to stand, the current government, with its current military capabilities, we're not going to be able to maintain a presence in the Middle East, or at least the Gulf states are going to look at us and say, well, you guys can't really provide protection to us from Iran, so why should we have you around?
Well, absolutely. And redouble, escalate even further, conducting more strikes against Iran. And in fact, this morning, there are reports that a third of the U.S. Navy carrier, the George H.W. Bush, is on the way, which is exactly what you would expect. In this kind of situation, the stakes for the United States are getting higher and higher. If only 10% of what Pezeshkian is talking about happens, not a complete dismantling of U.S. bases, which I can't imagine the Gulf states agreeing to something.
It's not worth $6 billion, but
if, say, we start to get security agreements between Iran and the Gulf states, with the Gulf states and Iran coming to regional arrangements for security, just to say, then of course for the neocons, this is an absolute nightmare. It means that Iran becomes integrated and accepted as a major player in the Middle East, which is of course the opposite of what they've been trying to achieve. It enormously increases Russian and, by the way, Chinese influence in the Middle East. So, of course, that means you've got to even more, you've got to intensify even more, redouble even further the conflict against Iran and try and achieve the regime change there, which is what this thing has been all about all along. And they'll be putting immense pressure on Trump. They'll be saying that if you don't do this, you've betrayed the United States, you've betrayed Israel, you've betrayed the entire Western system in the Middle East, you've empowered the forces of evil in Tehran, and Trump seems to be extraordinarily susceptible to this kind of language. Also, it will tell him something else, which you will like even less. If you do this, you are a loser. Trump hates being seen as a loser. This is the thing that agitates him and frightens him more than anything else. So you have all of that playing out. And of course, as far as the neocons are concerned, a trifling matter like an explosion in the oil price, a depression in the United States, economic crisis, crisis in the financial markets, that sort of thing has never been known to stop the neocons. They've never concerned about things like that. On the contrary, any hint that the United States might be getting weaker makes them want to become more aggressive in order to impress on everybody around the world, first and foremost themselves, that actually the United States is even stronger. Just the same.
Yeah, they've got Trump isolated. Vance is out of the picture, completely out of the picture. Gabbard disappeared. The neocons are probably telling Trump, the Lindsey Grahams, and all these people. They're probably telling the Trump administration, look, if you don't get this done, then you're going to be the one that's going to be thrown under the bus. The Democrats are going to win. We're going to impeach you. Republicans and Democrats, we're going to go after you. We're going to go after you. We're going to go after your family. Who knows what else they're going to do to Trump? Who knows what information they have and what else they're going to throw out to the media, of which is integrated. The entire media is integrated with the whole neocon as well.
Yes.
So I mean, for Trump, this is becoming existential. For him.
Absolutely. It was an extraordinary, reckless, irrational gamble. He shut out everybody who was trying to tell him that this is an extremely risky, wrong, unethical thing to do. He shut out everybody. He listened to Netanyahu. He listened to all these people around him. He was persuaded that it was all going to be very easy. The neocons always say it's easy. The neocons always tell you how easy it is going to be. And they come along with evidence to prove it. They provide you with opinion polls that 80% of people in Iran are yearning to overthrow the government of Iran. And they tell you that the Iranian army military security system is terrible. They tell you that the Israelis have absolute control of everything that goes on the ground in Iran. So the thing to do always is to pay no attention to these people, because the arguments they always give, the facts they always trot out, always and invariably turn out to be wrong. As we can see at the moment, Iran says it may not remain so indefinitely, but even CNN, who are there on the ground, are saying it.
Well, we're 1 week into this.
Well,
We haven't seen a regime change.
We haven't seen a regime change. Instead, what we see is the Gulf of Hormuz essentially closed and the price of oil rising. And the idea of the US providing naval escorts and insurance to tankers, that's
Nonsense.
nonsense.
Nonsense. Some of the dumbest stuff that has come out of the Trump White House. And then he had an official, an energy official yesterday, go on to Fox News and say that they're going to take all the oil. That's what this is all about now.
Yeah.
It's about all the oil. Meanwhile, you have the bonehead Johnson, Mike Johnson, continuing to say this is not a war. He's been saying it now for a week.
Yes.
This is not a war. Their entire messaging is a complete mess.
It is.
Absolute complete mess. Everyone is saying different things.
Yeah.
No one can give a coherent messaging, a reason as to why they're in this.
Exactly.
And they can't even put together 3 or 4 simple goals. Why are we doing this? What are the reasons? What are the goals of this operation? The boots on the ground, maybe no boots on the ground, maybe Kurds, maybe not Kurds. We're getting reports about U.S. National Guard now being called up, getting ready to go into Iran. Trump can't even make up his mind.
No.
I like boots on the ground. I don't like boots on the ground. Maybe we'll go with the Kurds. Maybe we won't go with the Kurds. It's a complete, utter mess. He has got, and I've been saying this for a while now. Go back to all our videos. Going back to a year. I've been saying Trump's communication team is the absolute worst. They rely on slogans for the dumbed down masses. Peace through strength. Bravo. Well said. Real good. Whatever the fuck that even means.
Exactly.
But that turns it into a foreign policy.
Exactly.
Our policy is peace through strength. What does it even mean?
He's going off.
The whole thing is dumb.
Yeah.
But you're right. You're actually right, Alexander, on the whole Lindsey Graham thing, because the Wall Street Journal even reported it.
Yeah.
If you want to believe what the Wall Street Journal is saying, I think in this instance, they are reporting accurately. They said it was Lindsey Graham, Jack Keane, some guy, Mark Beeson. I think he's a writer for the Washington Post. I'm not sure. And all these people were lobbying Netanyahu, of course. All these people were pressing Trump over the past year, lobbying him to go to war with Iran. They're presenting him all these reasons. It's exactly what you said. Iran is weak. The military is weak. We have to strike now. Netanyahu has given me this intel. Lindsey Graham was taking this intel to Trump. He made all these trips to Israel. General Jack Keane was the absolute worst. Why are you listening to these people? He was talking about how easy it was going to be to get a regime change and to defeat Iran. Almost all the same things we heard about Project Ukraine.
Exactly.
From the bonehead Biden administration.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. The other problem with Trump, and I'm going to say this, he stopped communicating with his base long ago. The trips that he used to make around the country, which he did, by the way, during his first term, going on these road shows, meeting with people, listening to what they had to say, that did provide some kind of correction to the advice of people like Lindsey Graham. He hasn't done that since he became president. So the result is that he's now falling into the talking crowd, and he listens and goes along with what they're saying. By the way, just a bit, I'm going to anticipate people are going to say that's an apologetic for Trump. It is not. It is the exact opposite. It shows again a weak, insecure, unstable president, somebody who's unfit to wield the kind of office that he now has.
Yeah, I mean, look, even if Trump makes zero decisions, even if he's just there, you still have to, for appearances, you still have to get him to speak to the media, he still has to sign things, he still has to present it as the president putting forward the policy, whichever way you look at it, whether you believe it's a strong executive, the system is a strong executive, the system has nothing to do with the president, whatever decision's already made, you still have to get the president, this person, on board.
Exactly.
Right, and that's the problem. He's completely on board with this, and you're right. He doesn't really do any rallies. He doesn't go out and speak to the American people. He sits in the Oval Office, and he takes questions, and that's it from reporters. Dumb questions. He gives dumb answers. He's never pressed on anything.
No. He talks statistics about ballrooms, talking about ballrooms and all that.
Grapes. Stuff like that, and how the U.S. is the hottest country in the world. What is that? What does that even fucking mean? The hottest country in the world. Is there some sort of Bloomberg list of the hottest countries, the top 10 hottest countries in the world that we don't know about?
Exactly.
It's just dumb stuff.
Absolutely.
All right, let's. Is there anything else that you want to cover, Tim, before we get to the questions?
I just wanted to repeat again and re-emphasize and underline what Cyrus this is something that overcomplicated plan to weaken China. It's to weaken China. This is all over.
Whether China ran away or Russia
ran away.
Exactly. In China.
Please, let's stop talking about China all the time. The Chinese will find their oil. They'll find it at a better price than we will in Europe. Just to say, they will come through.
Exactly. Europe's in big trouble. Biden is now talking about lifting sanctions on Russia. He's going to go to China, just to give everyone an idea how stupid this administration is. He's going to go to China in April, and he's going to tell the Chinese to stop buying Russian oil. And yesterday he gives an interview saying we're going to lift the sanctions off of Russian oil that we put on Russian oil because of the war that we now have with Iran and because of the Strait of Hormuz. So now we're going to lift all the sanctions on Russian oil.
It's not Pomerantz, is it?
Buying Russian oil. It's beyond dumb.
Absolutely. By the way, just for that, just to say something about that, I understand it was the US that contacted India.
Yes, Selden. Absolutely. When did India say they're going to stop buying Russian oil?
Exactly.
They never said they're going to stop buying Russian oil.
Oh, because they're making the Indians who came to them to ask for a license to buy Russian oil. The Indians never said anything.
This is crazy.
People need to stop paying any attention to what comes out of the
I don't know.
about these things. Unfortunately,
This is no mistake.
these people lie constantly about these matters and about lots of others.
They make stuff up, and then they believe the stuff that they make up.
Exactly.
Commander Crossfire says, now they stood beside the treasure on the mountain dark and red, turned the stone and looked beneath it. Peace on earth was all it said.
Quite true.
Chucky Monkey said, isn't Khamenei dying some bad optics for Trump? Yeah.
Well, it's extremely bad optics for Trump. I'm not sure what it does for Iran either. By the way, just to say, this whole thing started with a revolt against a monarchy, and it's replacing one supreme leader with another supreme leader who's the son of the previous supreme leader, has a look about it of dynastic succession. So I wonder how popular in Iran that's going to be, but I doubt that's the main issue.
I don't get
And
why
I
that's
can understand at the political level by maintaining continuities and that.
But you go to war in Afghanistan for 20 years to remove the Taliban, only to
I don't know.
the Taliban come back. So you take out Khamenei, only to
Fairly.
yeah. Turbo Tall says, Pezeshkian just declared never surrender.
Absolutely. I mean, he said that as well. He said that to Putin in this call, which nobody's mentioning. So this is, of course, what the Iranians are saying altogether. We're not going to surrender. When Trump is calling for unconditional surrender. That statement, if taken literally, and the Iranians have no choice, by the way, but to take it literally, means that there can be no negotiations, because Trump isn't looking for negotiations. If you take it literally, he's looking for capitulation.
Yeah. Well, Arakshi said negotiations.
No way, it's gonna come back.
I mean, you guys have practiced twice when we negotiated with you.
So,
Haruka, thank you for the 2 super chats. R.W. Swall says, very soon, if not already, civilian deaths in Iran will exceed those in Ukraine in February 2022. Will the ICC be issuing a warrant to arrest Trump yet?
no, absolutely, completely agree. No, of course they won't. I mean, the ICC, Alex has done brilliant programs about it, is an institution that no one outside a few lawyers in London and a few misguided people in Berlin take seriously anymore.
R.W. Swall says, Trump shouldn't sack those who tell him the truth.
No, of course he should. Of course he does. How he has ever allowed Lindsey Graham to gain so much influence over his administration is incredible.
It's incredible.
Alex, which is exactly right. The real president of the United States is Lindsey Graham. It is not Donald Trump. Lindsey Graham conducts diplomacy, he runs foreign policy, he chooses priorities, and he just decides when the United States goes to war.
Sanjiva says, hello Duran, hope you are well. Black Zoop says, Pezeshkian, unless attacks are carried out from there. That's the quote.
Yeah, well, yes. I've seen that, but this isn't that. Those words can carry all kinds of.
If you assume those are the words, what does that tell you? Let's say those are the words, like you said.
Yeah.
What does that tell you?
Yeah,
What's the message that you think he's been putting out there?
Well, what he's telling to the Arab states is we are being attacked by the United States, and the United States is using bases that you host in order to attack us. How can we disregard that? That seems to me to be the message. But the other part of the message is, look, we are not looking to be your enemies. It's just that you have these false friends. Get rid of these false friends, and we will be your friends forever. That's basically what he's saying. If you think about it.
Right. Sanjeva says, 82nd Airborne has been called in from Louisiana. Koslava, so ground offensive definitely happening. Yeah.
Well, that's right. I mean, the 82nd, exactly. To repeat again, these are exceptionally well-trained soldiers, but it's a light infantry force. So could it be able to march on a Tehran? The logistics to do this are
Is your goal to march on Tehran, or is your goal just to create
perhaps 6 or 7. But then deploying ground troops like that creates the real risk of much higher casualties.
Jabal says people think they have a strategy. No, not really.
Right, I mean, I think they're making it up from one day to the next.
I agree with that, Jeff, yeah.
That's, you know,
Spot on, they don't have a strategy. The way Hegseth talks about Iran and war killing is unbelievable. If North Korea were speaking in this way, we would call them barbaric.
I consider it, as I said, borderline. It's irrational. Borderline insane. I mean, he's clearly completely out of his depth. He should never have become defense secretary.
Agreed. Ibsen says thank you. Eddie V2 is a new member to the Dragon community. Pinto Raul says projected economic downturns in the U.S. may compel the Trump administration to pivot or scale back its current international engagements. Your thoughts?
Well, it's possible, but I mean, go back to what we said at the beginning, that the neocons have never logistics or issues of availability of weapons or any of those kind of things to influence their decisions. On the contrary, it's more likely, if they sense a downturn is coming, to want to escalate even more. That is what the neocons are. That's how they work. That's how they think.
No reverse gear. There's also something else to say about the neocons, Alexander, which no one talks about, but you say it often, which is the neocon wars. They always start out big, and then they turn into disasters, right?
Exactly.
Jungle Jin says Azerbaijan's bellicosity, isn't it vulnerable?
Yes, it is extremely vulnerable. And I think they're rumors, and I mean, they're more than rumors. I mean, they're reports from Russia that the Russians are losing patience with Aliyev, and that they've actually begun in secret criminal proceedings against him and other members of the Azerbaijani elite, and that they have indictments for him because of drugs, involvement in the international drugs trade and other criminal activities on Russian territory, just to say.
Sanjeva says tourism to everywhere is getting hit as most airlines use Gulf as a hub, and for that high oil and gas price, world GDP will certainly nosedive.
Of course.
Good point. Demon Jump says much love from behind enemy lines in Epstein's dam. Principled Uncertainty says simple question for the Warhawks. Would we in the West have had more or less terrorism without Israel's endless wars of peace? Honest answer is only.
Well, the honest answer is that if Israel had sought peace, which it could easily have done, which could have absolutely properly have done, I think we would be in a much more peaceful situation altogether. That is my view.
The hockey goalie says, is Iran apology a tactical mistake given attacks stretching U.S. resources and causing economic pressure, likely to be interpreted as a sign of weakness? That's a good point. Could the Netanyahu statement be interpreted as a sign of weakness?
Yeah, I think some people in Washington are undoubtedly going to interpret it in exactly that way. And that, unfortunately, brings us back to Pezeshkian. He has consistently shown this softness relative to the United States and Israel as well, but especially the United States. And this has always, in my opinion, played against Iran's interests. His predecessor, Ebrahim Raisi, was a much tougher character. I think handled this sort of thing much better. That's not to say, by the way, I said this already, that I don't consider Pezeshkian a decent man. I think he's a very decent man, very nice man. But I don't think he's the right person to be president of Iran at this time.
R.W. Swell says it's actually a war.
Nice man, but sort of thing much better. That's not to say, by the way, I said this already, that I don't consider Pezeshkian a decent man. I think he's a very decent man, very nice man. But I don't think he's the right person to be president of Iran at this time. This was a much, in my opinion, played against Iran's interests. His predecessor, Ebrahim Raisi, was a much tougher character. I think handled this sort of thing much better. That's not to say, by the way, I said this already, that I don't consider Pezeshkian a decent man. He's a very decent man, a very nice man. But I don't think he's
Thank you, sir. Very kind of you, man.
So how does traditional private equity make money?
How does traditional PE funds make money?
Yeah.
One, they go on a roadshow and they convince larger investors, whether that's universities, pension funds, endowments, to commit money to their fund. The fund typically has a mandate, which is to say we're going to go and buy businesses in a certain sector, and they get a fee for the total assets that are being managed, which is called the assets under management, the AUM. Traditionally, that fee has been 2% of the total assets under management. So if they have $1 billion in capital commitments, they charge $20 million per year. That's the first way they make their money. That's what they use to pay their offices, their staff, their labor force, access to software, as well as that's how the partners themselves derive a living, a very good living. Now, the second way that they make their money is the performance of those assets that are being managed. So typically, the second way they make their money comes later down the line, based on future performance. And there they get what's called a carried interest, which is essentially a piece of the upside above and beyond minimum performance thresholds. And traditionally, that was 20% upside. Now, one last thing I'll mention is there's something called a hurdle rate. It's called a hurdle rate. It's a bit loud. I get a sip of my coffee before it gets too damn quick, right? I always thought it was fancy when they put the coffee in these like little Italian cups.
Yeah, the small little cup.
The small little cup, the fancier coffee. Hurdle rate. So a hurdle rate is essentially the minimum performance
Alright,
threshold
so they're pretty much some people that are never trusted these psych entrepreneurs.
Point they get to unlock their carried interest, right? Which is their 20% of performance. And the reason there's a hurdle rate is, think about it from the investor point of view, the one putting money into the fund. They could take their money, they could put it in United States Treasury bonds, very safe, very low return, but very safe. They could take their money and they could put it in the S&P 500, which is typically the 500 largest companies in the United States. Historically, that does between 6 and 8% annualized returns. So these are safe bets. So they could safely get between 6 and 8% by betting in an ETF. It's an exchange-traded fund. It's just an instrument of getting through one investment access to multiple stocks. They could do that and get 8% a year. So why should they pay you on the first 8% when you can get that without risk? Which is why there's a hurdle rate that typically means above and beyond the minimum performance threshold. Only at that point does the fund manager start to unlock carried interest. So that's how they make their money. Two ways. Fees from assets under management, carried interest, above and beyond a certain hurdle rate. Does that make sense?
Is that hurdle rate really like 8%? Okay.
All of this stuff is negotiable. So these are the levers of discussion and levers of negotiation. But I would say it also depends on the track record of a fund manager, because we say fund manager, but some of these are literally global institutions that have been trading for 50 years. Some of them are on their 15th fund, 16th fund, and so there's a lot of demand for access to their product, versus you might have a first-time money manager who's maybe 45 years old, who used to work at one of these institutions, but who's never launched a fund before, and they may have a different hurdle rate because the investor is taking a larger risk, a bet on this manager. But I would say, generally speaking, 10 to 12% hurdle rate is what a new manager should expect. By the way, this is a compounded hurdle rate, right? So what that means is, imagine that the fund, imagine that the investors commit to $1 billion, and it's a 10-year life cycle. And imagine that they say it's a 6-year investment cycle and then a 4-year maturity cycle, right, where they make divestments or IPOs, and maybe with the possibility to extend for 2 more years, so that it can be 12-year total cycle, of which 6 is investing and the second 6 is reaping the returns. There's not going to be a return every business every year, right? It might take many years to build a group and then list it on the stock exchange, for example, or to build a group and then exit, for example. And so this hurdle rate of, call it 10 to 12% per year is a compounding hurdle rate. Does that make sense? Meaning, if exits only start happening by year 7, then the manager has to deliver, first and foremost, a 10 to 12% annually compounded return to the investor, beyond which point they can then unlock their carried interest, which traditionally could be 20%.
Surprised that they get right for
extracting management fees, which is simply a percentage of the total assets under management, traditionally less than 2%. Now, in reality, 2 and 20 is that 2% management fee, 20% carried interest. That's sort of the vanilla of private equity. But that 20 years ago, 30 years ago, but now it's kind of thick. I think more realistically now, what you're seeing is anything from like 1.5, for example, maybe 1 to 1.5% annual management fees to maybe 10, 15, sometimes 20, sometimes 30% carried interest. It really depends. This idea that there's 2 and 20 fixed is that I think it's negotiable every single time. Negotiable per fund, negotiable per investor, negotiable per investment cycle, right? Depends. Any business, whether you open a restaurant, a barber shop, or whether you open start a tech company, you have a ramp-up period where you're not making any money. Assuming at some point you do start making money, what are the levers that you can pull on to make some money? So what I would say is, first and foremost, we talked about in other episodes that you have employment, you have ownership, and you have control. And when you're a deal sponsor and you buy a business, you can essentially be employed by that business. Employed as what, you might ask? You can be employed as the group CEO. I wouldn't advise it, but you could be. You could be employed as the chairman, the chairperson. That's possible. But these are titles and designations. The function is essentially you can be a director. So, especially in the UK, this term, this classification of being a director comes with certain duties. Typically in business and commerce, duties that you have to adhere to are referred to as fiduciary duties. And as a director in a UK business, by accepting that role, you also accept certain fiduciary duties. Now, what are those fiduciary duties? Those duties are that you should act in the best interest of all shareholders. So as a director in a business in the UK, you literally have a legal mandate to act in the interest of all shareholders. Interestingly enough, if you unfortunately end up in an insolvency situation where a business is going under, your duties then shift from having a fiduciary duty to shareholders to then having a fiduciary duty to creditors. But that aside, you absorb these duties. Now, as a part of taking on some of these duties and being the deal sponsor, the one that put it together, the one who is sort of managing communications and interactions between the previous seller, who's probably now a consultant of some sort, the investors who put in the equity, and the banks, being the chief liaison between these people and being the one managing or at least overseeing the daily management teams, whether it's the MDs or the CEOs, you can, in exchange for those services, extract a service fee, or extract a wage, or extract a salary. And obviously your ability to extract that service fee, that wage, that salary, is sort of influenced by the size, scale, and profitability of the specific business. In other words, if you buy one company and it's a tiny business, doesn't make a lot of profits, your ability to extract fees is limited. If you buy a few businesses that do make profits amongst themselves, your ability to extract a wage, a fee, is increased. So that's one way. The second way, which you never really get to, is eventually at some point, you become, well, you are a shareholder, and at some point you're a shareholder in a business that is presumably debt-free, right? It is unencumbered of, credit obligations. Why? Because it's gone through its amortization schedule, right? So it's paid down its debt over 3, 4, 5 years, and having been fully amortized, paid all of its debt down, now you are a shareholder in a profitable business that, net of paying taxes, typically has net profits, which can either be kept in the business, which is called retained earnings, because you want to keep it there because you want a liquidity cushion for future commercial shocks, or maybe you want a little bit of working capital to go do other things within the business, expand through hiring people, or you sort of extract some of that working capital by paying a dividend. If you keep net profits, it's called retained earnings. If you pay them out, they're typically paid out as what's called dividends. And being a shareholder in a business that's now free of debt, is no longer encumbered by creditors, you participate as a shareholder. What's called pro rata. Pro rata, P-R-O-R-A-T-A. All that means is if you own 10% of the business, you get 10% of the dividends. If you own 35% of the business, you get 35% of the dividends. So that's another way that you can make some money. I have not attracted any damn dividends. That shit is hard. Why? Because the point is, if you keep buying businesses, you keep pushing the reset button on credit. So you buy a business, it's got a 4 or 5 year amortization schedule. If you wait 6 years, it's debt free. It starts paying dividends. But if year 2 you buy another business, you just push reset. Year 4 you buy another business, you just push reset. What do you think I keep doing?
So to do a pure equity deal, like buying a business entirely with an investor's money, can you even keep any ownership for yourself?
Yes. I don't think of things in binary ways. So I like to think of things of what is the universe of optionality. So when you're negotiating with investors, what are the sentiments that are involved? What are they trying to optimize for versus what are you trying to optimize for? The equity investor is trying to optimize for a return on their investment. We got a guy in the back playing with a guitar, so hopefully the sound is acceptable. But the equity investor is trying to optimize for a return on their investment. Ideally, they probably don't want to have too much of their bandwidth allocated to this investment because they typically have a wide portfolio of other investments, meaning they don't want to show up on Monday morning and turn the lights on. They want someone else to do it. Ideally, they want to have a dedicated team in place that makes sure that the business performs against budget and against expectations such that they don't suffer permanent loss of capital. And in order to do that, they need to incentivize other people. Who are these people? Well, the managing directors that run the daily operations through a salaried compensation as an employee, typically a group CEO, assuming you're building a group, who maybe has a salaried compensation as well as some equity participation if it works out. But at the end of the day, you, as the deal flow, that equity guy, watching 0 to 100 million, looking for companies to buy, you, the alternative private equity guy, are the deal sponsor. You're the one who put it together. You're the one who found the company, negotiated the terms, got the seller on board, managed the seller expectations, lined up the credit, right? Speaks and liaises with the banks. Probably the one that identified the CEO, put that manager in place. And you're the one who is the ultimate steward of responsibility for the entire investment as a package. Therefore, you need to be incentivized. Your primary means of incentivization is unlikely to be a salary in a deal that you put together yourself. It's likely to be some sort of share participation in the business. So my answer to you, when you ask if you fund a deal through just pure equity, can you even keep shares, is to say the instrument of finance has nothing to do with the terms of the investment. Whether or not it's 100% equity funded or some combination of bank funding and equity from an investor, all that represents is the capitalization of that investment. At the end of the day, there's the capitalized investment, and then there are the people that manage that investment. In many ways, you are the replacement to the traditional fund manager that has assets under management. Key word, under management. Someone is staying up at night making sure that those businesses are performing and is preempting the potential issues and challenges around the corner and presumably mitigating those issues, therefore mitigating the risks that are associated with those issues, so that the investor can sleep at night, having a diversified portfolio that now includes this investor. So that's a long answer. It's a long way to say I do not foresee any scenario where it is acceptable that you, as the alternative private equity guy, the deal sponsor that puts this whole thing together, doesn't get shares. Why? Why would you even accept those terms? I mean, presumably once you have got the deal and a letter of intent, you have control, command and control of that transaction. So if the proposed equity investor, fails to see that you are more valuable being a shareholder, take that deal somewhere else. It's like going to a public basketball court, but it's your fucking basketball, dude. So if I don't get to play, no one gets to play. Walk off the court with your basketball. And in the meantime, you know what to do. But 0 to 100.
All right, everybody, welcome to part 2 of the All In podcast, episode 263. We promised you a part 2 because we are very lucky that my dear friend, Shobha Fishavar, was able to set up a very important, historic interview for us today. None other than Prince Reza Pahlavi is here, and we have a limited amount of time with you, Reza. And may I call you Reza, or should I call you Prince Reza, or...
Thank you. Thank you for having me on your program.
It's great to have you, Reza. And may I call you Reza, or should I call you Prince Reza? Or
Thank you. Thank you for having me on your program.
It's great to have you, and this is a moment I think we've been waiting 47, close to 50 years for, which is we are at this moment in time looking at potentially the people of Iran being free. You left the country and when you were 17 years old to become a pilot, and now you are looking to help the people with the transition post-military activity, this operation, essentially a war that's going on right now that we all hope gets resolved quickly. I think people would love to know, what is your vision for Iran post this military action?
Well, thank you again for the opportunity. Before I get into that, I wanted to simply stress the importance of this intervention that for us was like a rescue mission. It was literally a humanitarian intervention to protect more lives that would otherwise be lost under this extremely brutal and repressive regime that, as you know, has massacred as of late tens of thousands of innocent and unarmed citizens. In order to equalize the playing field, this was a much-needed intervention that a lot of Iranians asked for, and fortunately it did happen. But what's the next step? Where are we headed to? The most obvious question will be, once the regime collapses, how do we manage the transition? I've stepped in to lead this transition with the help of many of my compatriots from various sectors. We believe that a stable transition will lead to address the immediate needs of the country, but then set the country on a path of redevelopment and reconstruction, which is of course something that we were always hoping for, that could not have happened under this corrupt mafia-like regime. Iran should have been, had it not been for the revolution, today's South Korea of the region. Instead, it has become the North Korea of the region. Why? Not because our people are not gifted or talented or capable, not because we lack natural resources. It's simply because of a corrupt, bad management and a regime that basically took our country hostage, used it as a launching pad to export an ideology, and that's why we are here today. A different Iran, a democratic secular Iran, will first and foremost bring about the opportunities for our nation, but it will open Iran for business again. Iran is one of the most untapped economic opportunities of the 21st century, and it could tremendously change the shape of our world in terms of what will be beneficial to the Iranian people, of course, but also from the vantage point of a country like the United States and billions of dollars that will be generated as a result of doing business in Iran. We figure about $1 trillion in the first 10 years to the U.S. market, but also billions of dollars that will be invested into Iran and everything that we need to have done in order to rebuild our country. These are crazy opportunities that we can look forward to, and it all starts with moving towards this recovery and transition.
And when your father was in charge, it was a monarchy, turned into a dictatorship. And to be clear, the hope now is to evolve into a democracy with free elections for the people. Average age of people in Iran now, early 30s, 31, 32 years old. What would that look like? What is a possible timeline? And you have said on one of the programs and on your YouTube channel, which I suggest everybody go search for and follow right now because you're speaking directly to the people on X and on your YouTube channel. What is the condition on the ground from the people you're talking to? You said you've been talking to people in the military, civilians, and other leadership. They're ready to move on. What's the timeline? And what are they telling you is happening on the ground today, as we see?
Well, I think that now the playing field has been equalized, meaning that the people could finally, of course, awaiting the end of this campaign, have a better opportunity to re-engage the streets and take over their homeland. Of course, part of the equation is how much inclusion from within the regime and how much defections from the regime in the sense of joining with the people this time and not be an instrument that will halt the people's progress, but instead help the people in that transition, meaning whether people are in the military or security forces, as well as the civilian bureaucracy. Unlike what happened after the fall of Saddam Hussein and the ba'athification, the scenario of change in Iran is totally different. Let's not forget, Iran is a multiple century old nation state. It's a country that is extremely unified and united for this common purpose. Under this tent, we have diverse groups that are joining in this national campaign. People who are on the right, the center, the left, monarchists, Republicans, ethnic groups, religious groups. Every sector of society is engaged. I've had tremendous amount of support coming from inside Iran. We have the support of the intelligentsia, we have the support of universities, we have the support of the working class, we have the support of the diaspora that can bring a lot to this equation. I think this is a good recipe that will allow us to manage this transition, but set the country to clean up, be ready for business, and create the opportunities that will finally impact, first and foremost, Iranians that have been starving as a result of this regime's corruption, but have a true opportunity to get back on track and improve their livelihood. And I think it's also good for those who partner with us in this process, because there's a lot to be done that will be win-win, as opposed to be lose-lose to the benefit of this corrupt regime that has been the story of the past almost 5 decades. So the difference lies in this change and how crucial it is. And of course, the reason we want to have a secular democracy, the final form to be determined by the people of Iran through free elections and a constitutional process, but most importantly is that under equality and the rule of law, all the opportunities that have been denied our nation as a result of this discrimination, as a result of disadvantaging the majority of Iranians, now it creates a true opportunity. And as I said earlier, I think Iranians are quite gifted. As much as it is attractive to entrepreneurs in the outside world looking in, there's so many gifted and talented young Iranians who would have a fair chance this time, a true chance for being using all their creativity and genius to bring our country back online. This will be an excellent, fantastic partnership that we're looking forward to.
So you've spoken about wanting to be on the ground now. What conditions and what timeline do you have for yourself? And this seems like a pretty high-risk thing to do. It would be pretty brave of you to go to the country now. What conditions have to be met for you to go to Iran, to go home for the first time in 47 years? And how close do you think we are to the people taking the streets now and for starting this transition?
Well, to be honest with you, it's very difficult to put an exact timeline. Factors that will expedite it is the level of separation from the regime, the level of defections, the strengthening of domestic organization and structure. How can we partner with elements from within that are not joining this campaign? All of these are factors that will contribute to the rapidity of the transition. As far as myself being there, obviously there are security concerns to make sure that it's safe enough for me to go there. I'm no use to anyone if I'm dead. So obviously we have to keep that in mind. But I would like to be able to be there as soon as possible. To be able to help as much as I can in this process. Obviously being in the country is an advantage. It's hard to do things from far away. I had no choice to be living in exile because of the circumstances. But I think that the opportunity is presenting itself, and the first opportunity that is created for me to safely return to Iran, I will obviously be there.
Just this morning, Trump said there will be no deal in Iran until unconditional surrender is given by whatever is left of the government there. What do you think of that condition? Is that the right move? Do you agree with Trump's ultimatum?
Well, let me look at it from the domestic prism. In order for a successful transition to occur, it has ultimately to be something that is legitimate in the eyes of the Iranian people. We haven't lost so many tens of thousands of lives just to settle for a continuity of the remnants of this regime. That will not fly. People will want to have a clean break. The alternative will be for all those who align with the secular democratic alternative. And there are some four core principles that whoever adheres to that, including people who may today feel away from the regime, would be able to agree to work together on that platform. The first and foremost issue is, of course, Iran's territorial integrity. That's an issue that is very close to the hearts of millions of Iranians, representing every aspect of our diversified country in terms of ethnicities, religions, and what have you. But we find ourselves in this united cause under one flag and under one nation. The second element that is a prerequisite to democracy is a clear separation of religion from state. That's a critical element for a democracy to occur. Equality of all citizens under the law, and the rule of law obviously is a critical aspect that guarantees all of the rights we're talking about. And the democratic process itself, meaning the fact that people elect their representatives to go to this constitutional assembly to debate the issues of what the next system could look like and what its laws should be, ratified by the people, which will bring us to the election of the first parliament of this new democracy, and of course the election of the first government of such democracy, at which point the transitional government hands over power to the elected representative of the people in the future government. That's pretty much the direction that we hope to manage this transition, and I'm playing a role in bringing about this transition with a very well-crafted plan that is in detail explaining, particularly focusing on the first 100 days. I created an organization called IPP, which is Iran Prosperity Project, but its first focus is the first 100 days. How we immediately stabilize the situation in Iran, how can we maximize the remaining elements that will join with us to be able to survive regime change and have a place in the future. These are the first components, and then we move forward with the plan.
Two quick questions. Under no circumstances would that be a monarchy? I think is a question everybody has for you, because you're the prince. This is a democracy. We don't have princes in democracies. And then number two, what do you ideally see as your role in the transition? And then would you like to have the opportunity to run for president and to lead the country out of this horrific nightmare for 47 years?
My focus is on the process, not the outcome. And as a neutral arbiter, I'm not taking sides with one form versus the other. That's for the people of Iran to choose. And I think the world has seen successful models in both the Republican system and a monarchic system. Examples, the republic that you have like in India or like in Israel or in France or the United States are not exactly the same, but that's under the Republican structure. In terms of parliamentary monarchies, we have the example of Japan, Sweden, Spain, other countries. So I don't think that necessarily you can equate democracy with one outcome in particular. It could be both models that people can emulate. So at the end of the day, again, it's not for me to choose the outcome. I'm here to be a bridge towards that outcome. That's the function of a transitional leader. Not to run for office, or not to have an aim for personal position of power or authority, but to be the element that unites the country towards a common purpose and they allow the nation to decide what is their preferred system. That's what elections and pre-elections should be all about. And the ballot box is the only means to measure people's opinion, and the majority will decide on that, and that's the process that I envisage to bring about.
What do you believe the people of Iran want? And in that monarchy subset, there are the Gulf monarchies, the Kingdom, UAE, Qatar. They are obviously distinctly different than a parliamentary, system. So I assume you wouldn't want to see that. What do you think the people of Iran will vote for?
Well, that's what you said. I mean, a democratic system clearly outlines how it should be and how it should not. I mean, if you want to look at the closest monarchy to the United States, technically speaking, is Canada. And it seems like if you want to look at it that way. And I think Canadians are quite happy with the democracy that they enjoy. And again, we have very good models of republic. Case in point, the United States. At the end of the day, as I said, it's for the Iranian people to determine what would be in their best interest, having looked this time, unlike what happened, by the way, 50 years ago. Nobody had a clear idea what Khomeini was suggesting in terms of this velayat al-faqih, as they call it, or the tutelage of the supreme leader. By the time he took over and power was established, it was too late. And since then, we've been hostages to this regime. This time, in full transparency, the Iranian people ought to have a clear idea of different models presented to them, and on that basis, having understood every aspect of what it could be, then they make their choice. This is a process that should be totally transparent, with enough time for debating different ideas. And again, as I said, let the democratic process unfold and let the people vote in majority what is their final choice. I'm not here to determine an outcome. I stress my role here is to manage this transition and create an opportunity that people have been deprived of for half a century to finally have a say as to what they would like to have for themselves in terms of sovereignty and determining their own future democratically.
Final question, and I'll get into a bunch of details with you, Shervin, as to the plan which I know you're helping construct, and I'm assuming you'll help execute on. Trump says he's going to pick the next leader. Trump says a lot of things. He says them sometimes in a provocative way. But he said he's not sure how you would play within your own country. There's obviously people holding up your picture. There are people who are maybe vying to take control of this from the previous administration. Are you in touch with President Trump? And what's your relationship with him today? What's your best plea to him or your argument to him to work with you?
Look, there's nothing hidden in the agenda. Everything is transparent, and I've been communicating with the administration via Steve Witkoff, who announced it publicly, as well as our channel to President Trump, and of course, on the other side, in the legislation with members of Congress, senators, and congresspeople, to understand a little bit from the American prism what it is that we are proposing here. I don't think that President Trump or any other leader in this world would presume that it is up to them to determine who should be the next leader in Iran. I'm sure as democracies, they respect the right for people to make that choice. And as Western democracies, it should be going without saying that they believe that the right to choose the future leaders is only up to the Iranian people. If the intention is to assist that process, if the intent is to support the Iranian people in their democratic aspiration, you provide them with the help, but the choice should be theirs. That has been my position, and I don't think there's a disagreement on that, whether it is with President Trump or other world leaders that I've also talked to about this matter.
As I let you go, what should the American people know about the spirit, the culture, and the people of Iran, including the people who fled in 1979, like you and your family?
Well, I know many Americans who have many Iranian friends. As a matter of fact, if you just look at the Iranian diaspora in the United States alone, you will see how much interaction there is between Iranians who are now Iranian Americans, if you will, many of them, and the kind of relationship they have built with their American counterpart. Many people have connections via marriages, many people have connections through business affiliations, many people have worked with Iranians, many of the high-tech companies, including Silicon Valley, employ so many Iranians,
Yes.
or they are themselves entrepreneurs. this is the kind of potential, and I'm sure Shervin will talk to you more about that, but this is the kind of connections there is. And for Americans that have traveled to Iran or have known Iranians all these years, they know what country it represents, what amount of culture, arts, civilization in a true sense Iranians represent. And they've been completely suffocated under this regime. But once Iran is free from its shackles, I'm sure a lot of Americans know what difference there is between an Iran that wants to be friends with America, that is not the regime that has from its inception called death to America or death to Israel, for instance, but there are Iranians who actually love to America. Let me just give you a last parting thought, because I think every now and then I need to remind your audience and other audiences. We talked about other countries in the region. Remember 9/11?
Yes.
And how many people on the streets of many of the so-called allies of the United States were celebrating that attack on that sinister day? The only country in the entire world and the entire region that actually stood in candlelight vigils in sympathy to the victims of the 9/11 terrorist attacks were no other than the Iranian people themselves, holding candlelight vigils in Iran. And they've been messaging America for years now. We are not your enemies. In fact, they've been chanting slogans in Iran saying, they lied to us, it's America. Our enemy is right here. This is the Iran I'm talking about. This is the people I'm talking about. And I know many Americans, both in the civilian sector, including military forces in America, know that. And I think that's something that I'm sure I'm not the only one talking about this. You will hear from other Iranians who will pretty much confirm what I just said. That's why this partnership is so vital for us, because together we'll be able to rebuild a different world. Iran will bring an element of stability to the region and beyond, and that can only play to the interest of America itself. We need to have this vital partnership, and I think we'll be able to succeed, because I see everybody now is very much committed to work together towards bringing this agenda forward.
We're all praying for the people of Iran to have a democracy, and what an amazing moment will be when you get to return in whatever capacity and help this transition, and 93 million people who have been suffering will be living free in a democracy, and the impact that could have on the world, and obviously that region would be by far the largest democracy in the Middle East. And this could have ramifications in terms of humanity that would be absolutely stunning and beautiful, and the prosperity would be amazing. The Iranian people I met in my life, Prince, when I was living in Los Angeles, all these great Persians I would meet were some of the most joyful and industrious, beautiful individuals I've met. They remind me of my Greek and Irish heritage, including you, Shervin. So, Prince Reza, thank you so much for your time. I know you're extremely busy. It's very important for the all-in audience to hear from you and to understand what's going on in your vision. And we would love to have you back when you're on the ground with your people, and that your people are free.
Thank you again. Looking forward to it.
All right, Shervin, thank you so much for setting this up.
Of course.
I asked for very few favors from my friends, but as a good friend, you made this happen for the all-in community, so I thank you for that. And as I said to the Prince, the people, and the Persians here in the United States, maybe you tell us a little bit about your story and what this means to you, and then we can get into your involvement here and what you hope to see in those first 100 days.
Of course. First of all, Jason, thank you for opening up this tremendous platform to the Iranian people and to the Prince. As you can see, the Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi is a great man, the most courageous man that I've ever met. And he's the highest integrity human I've met as well. We're very blessed as a people to have a leader like him who has lived a very clean life and has stepped up in a very courageous way. He's put it all on the line for his people and his legacy to play this tremendous transitional role to evolve the Iranian nation to a democracy. And this long nightmare of 47 years that all of my Iranian brothers and sisters have suffered through is almost over. And also tremendous gratitude to President Trump for his courageous leadership on this matter. I don't think any other president would have the courage and the principle and the values to take on this Islamic regime of terror. As you saw last month, they massacred over 43,000 Iranians who were just peacefully protesting. They gunned them down with anti-material bullets. I put a post of a Coca-Cola can next to these bullets. It was bigger than a can. That's what
And this is super important to meditate on for a second here. This regime is a murderous and evil regime. To turn those guns and mow down 40,000, over 40,000 individuals peacefully protesting is just an act of savagery and brutality that I think most people don't appreciate or don't fully appreciate. There hasn't been enough coverage of that fact.
No.
And you are a bipartisan type person. I've known you for many years. You were a super funder of Obama. He wasn't able to get this done. Biden wasn't able to get this done. Bush wasn't able to get this done. This has been something that presidents have struggled with. And you got to give Trump credit here. There's a lot of debate over why this is happening. Is Israel driving it? Is it the relationship with China? We talked about that in part one. At the end of the day, as a son of Iran, what matters is that the people are free. All these other conspiracy theories and motivations do not matter to you or the people, yeah?
Absolutely not. But one of my key principles is our moral security presages our physical security. So this has as much to do with Americans' security as it does Iranians' security and livelihood. As you saw, this regime is not only evil enough to mow down 43,000 innocent people in 48 hours, their reaction to this liberation operation is to attack over 12 countries in the region. Imagine if they had a nuclear bomb. They would use it. They would use it. There's not even a doubt in my mind that they would have used it by now if they had it. So this is incredibly important for America's national security. As the Prince mentioned, 9/11 happened. That's the same kind of ideology, except the problem we have in our modern time is that basically criminal and terrorist organizations have taken over sovereign nations with nuclear bombs or seeking nuclear bombs, where you have Russia, China, you have North Korea, and you have Iran, and then you have Venezuela. So the president has not only gotten rid of the Maduro in Venezuela, he has now begun the process of dismantling this Islamic regime, who is absolutely not a legitimate government and not a legitimate nation state, and the only leader that is legitimate to lead us to a transition process to become a democracy is the Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi. We are very lucky, I think, in our modern times to have three leaders who are living at the same time and leading at the same time as President Trump, President Netanyahu, Prime Minister Netanyahu, and the Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi, all in this one moment in time. I think we're living in biblical times. When 10/7 happened, I started the Israeli-Iranian Alliance with Michael Eisenberg, Michael Bruchaim, Jesse Mateen, Sean Rad, and we started to host these salons with the Crown Prince. One was in New York. Michael Eisenberg flew in, Dan Loeb, lots of leaders came, and that was the beginning of the process that was seeded with a breakfast with Michael Eisenberg as a VC and the #1 VC in Israel 15 years ago, where we said we have to do more between Israeli and Jewish community and the Persian Iranian community, and someday we're going to have tea in Tehran. And we wrote an op-ed last year about this, and we began to build these bridges. And this connection between the Jewish people and the Iranian people goes back 2,500 years. Cyrus the Great, who's in the Bible, freed the Jews from slavery in Babylon, returned them to their homeland in Jerusalem, and rebuilt their temple. And that he is celebrated for that courageous act in the Bible and in Jewish religious holidays, and it is a tremendous connection that goes back now 2,500 years later in kind of biblical symmetry. You have the Jewish people helping free the Iranian people from their slavery. And at the same time, there is a connection between America's beginning that many people don't know, is that Thomas Jefferson was a student of Cyrus the Great who declared the first Declaration of Human Rights. And a lot of the principles that went into the Declaration of Independence of America and the founding of America and the Bill of Rights and the Constitution have its roots in Cyrus the Great and Persian history. And so this connection between America's founding and the principles that Iranians espoused for 2,500 years is this beautiful connection between the Jewish people, the American people, and the Iranian people.
And this could have such a tremendous impact on the region, who have essentially a lone democracy in Israel, and now to have 93 million Iranians in a democracy. If that can be achieved, and listen, there's a long way to go, this could spiral out of control. This was a very high-risk move by Trump, President Trump. Should give him a lot of credit for that. But he has to own this. So let's be humble, and we got to pray for the best here. Things can spiral out of control in these kind of situations. But let's hope that we do get to democracy there. I'm curious. Sure, we spent a lot of time in the Middle East. I have, over the last 3 years, gotten myself educated and caught up, I hope, and have started doing business there and really meeting a larger swath of people. The Gulf monarchies are modernized incredibly, starting with the UAE, Saudi, now the Kingdom, and of course Qatar as well, modernizing Oman, Kuwait. What would Iran going straight to a democracy, if that is even possible, what would that do to the region in your mind?
I think that what the Gulf countries have done is a tremendous case study of what the potential for the Middle East truly is. Being blessed by God to have oil, gas, the way that most GCC countries have, and Iran so has, gives them an advantage to be able to have the resources independently to develop themselves. And when you look at what happened in UAE over the last 25 years, I went to UAE in 2001, 2002, and there was a smattering of buildings there.
Yeah, I've seen the pictures of Dubai then and now.
It's incredible. It's incredible. And it reminds me of what America was like in the 1950s when they came back from World War II. Eisenhower built the interstate highway system, and America developed into this superpower. And in many ways, the GCC countries espoused that American mentality of everything is possible, anything is possible, and they manifested their greatness. And you look at Iran, you have 93 million unbelievably brilliant people who have been held back. You look at the Iranian diaspora in America, just our fellow friends who you may know, Dara, Uber, myself at Uber, of course, Omi Kordestani at Google, Ali at Databricks, Pierre Homidor at eBay. When you add up the numbers, it gets to trillions of dollars of value have been created by this small population of Iranians in America, and especially in Silicon Valley. And I've been blessed to be part of that circle. And, one, thank God for America, that we had a safe sanctuary to come and develop our brilliance. But there are as many brilliant Iranians, way more brilliant Iranians.
Yeah, on a numbers basis, it's a magnitude more.
And so this will be a free, democratic Iran will be the greatest peace dividend and economic dividend to be gifted to the world and to the region. So I think what will happen is we will have an acceleration of the Middle East becoming this unbelievable place where innovation and investment in the future is happening. We're at the dawn of AGI and advanced superintelligence. We have quantum computing, which you and I, and Emil Michael and others have done with our SPAC and D-Wave. These technologies are going to fast forward humanity, and being able to tap into the resources of the Middle East and Iran in human capital and in oil and gas wealth to be able to unleash an accelerated future is something that we all look forward to. And one of the things the team, the Crown Prince's vision, this is a 105-page report right here of the Iran Prosperity Project, and I'm blessed to be an advisor there with many other very talented Iranians. And this, piece by piece, month by month, has a sequence of plans to rebuild Iran, as the Crown Prince was talking about, so that when we free Iran, there will be a 4-month process to get to a referendum. and then a 6-month process to assemble Iranians to write a constitution, and then
Feels like he said he would become CEO of another organization. Yeah. Let's see.
We will get you 1 million views or you don't pay. If you give me 15 seconds, I'll explain exactly how this works. First, we'll build a tailored system around what's working in your niche.
So in like 2012, 2013, 2014, he started a vitamin brand, and it only did okay. And then he started also tinkering with a skincare brand, which it actually did much better. It got to like 10 million or so in revenue. He hired a CEO. The CEO kind of like drove it into the ground and didn't really do that well. So he started focusing again to his vitamin brand, and he's like, look, it's doing okay, but who's the best customer of a vitamin company? Dogs. Because this isn't, I'm not disparaging him, but like, do they work? Yeah, why not? Like Fugazi, you know, like.
Yeah, welcome to Fugazi Inc.
Yeah.
We make supplements for dogs. They'll never tell you if it works or doesn't work.
What up?
What up?
Are we supposed to like start with like a catchphrase now?
Hey boys and girls, welcome to the business show where you learn how to make so much money that you'll get taxed out the ass. That's what rich people care about, taxes. If you don't care about taxes yet, you ain't rich.
Do you care about taxes?
Yeah.
I'm not gonna live my life according to like where the low taxes are, but like it's like the number 2 or number 3 thing that I'm thinking about. So I'm thinking about this whole New York, Texas thing, and I like do the math, and I'm like, damn, like imagine I gotta rent a place for let's just say like 20 grand a month. Like that's how much taxes I'm paying by moving here versus staying, or you know whatever it is, like a lot of money a month.
Well, you have a good thing. You could do the like Texas remaining residence and spend 4 or 5 months out of the year in New York. So that's not so bad.
That's not so bad. But I need to do it with New York and Florida because Texas winter is not like winter that's desirable enough that you want to winter there. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Dude, have you heard about this, like the teddy bear law? The teddy bear rule?
What's that?
So I was asking my tax guy, I was like,
where you keep your like possessions?
yeah. Basically, I was like, so what's the rule? Is it 6 months out of the year? What does it take to have residency in some place? And he was like, well, there's a bunch of little factors. He's like, there was a famous case with Derek Jeter, the New York Yankees shortstop. They're like,
Jeter played for the Yankees in New York, but he didn't want to pay New York taxes. He wanted to pay Florida taxes because he's like, look, this is my home, this is where I live, blah, blah, blah. But you also have an apartment in New York, and you play in New York, so you work there, your home is there, and your kids go to school there, I think, and so they ended up, it got ruled in court, and they call it, I think, the name they call it is I haven't looked this up, it's like the teddy bear law, and it's basically like, where would you keep your teddy bear? So the place you would call home. So like factors like where your kids go to school, where are the possessions that you love, it all goes into this like umbrella to be like, where do we actually think your home is? And actually when I first heard this, I was like, wow, that's really like subjective for like a ruling or a law. And actually it's one of the laws I kind of agree with. I actually think that is more like how it should be done, which is like, dude,